Planning is becoming more and more of an issue. I think if we look back to 2008, obviously access to capital itself was a big issue. And nowadays, with so many different lenders in the market, you've got brokers like myself who are navigating all of that. And there's liquidity. It's kind of fair to say. It's just how you get access to it, or having access to the best of it, is probably the challenge, but something that can be overcome because of the availability in itself. Planning, though, seems to be right now the biggest constraint in terms of solving the affordable housing crisis. And there just seems to be no rock solid solution in sight, which, like, different people have been saying different things. I've been following kind of Facebook groups and threads and forums and all sorts, and having different conversation with different people. One particular person was saying that you should be allowed to kind of the massing of a building should be automatically agreed in a specific time, space, and location, and then the externals that can be agreed later on, but it's going to get agreed with somebody along the way, as long as. So I think, I mean, what's your take on it? You're in this day in, day out. What is the biggest reason that we have such difficulty with the planning system, and it's getting worse, not better? And any suggestions or solutions that you can throw out?
Sure. I think there's a number of factors as to why over time it's got gradually worse. Underfunding of the planning system is a huge problem, as with a lot of public departments at the moment. But I think planning has been ignored. And typically any increase in planning fees and costs and pre-app fees and things like that are not typically ring-fenced within a council. So whilst on paper they seem to be driving more income into their department, quite often that can then get taken and put elsewhere within a council. So they're very constrained. And also, if you look at kind of salary levels of planning officers as compared to the private sector of the industry, there's quite a gap there. And so, you know, quite often the very agile and top of their game planning officers might often get poached and move into the private sector. I actually have quite a lot of admiration for most planning officers, because their job is not easy. They're dealing with private client side applicants, who obviously want to get planning permission and they want to get it as quickly as possible. And I'm sure some can be sort of quite aggressive in the way in which they approach that. But then they're also dealing with obviously all of the public interest, and planning is a very emotive topic for the private individual. I think as a nation we are quite anti-change, and where planning and development has become very politicised, certainly of the last sort of 2 or 3 years, and we'll probably see that increase as we head towards the general election this year, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's created divide, and so developers are kind of tarnished as this one-size-fits-all, horrible money-grabbing people that come in and destroy areas and roll out in our Rolls Royces drinking champagne, and leave communities kind of destroyed with our development. But I think that that's an unfair characterisation of a lot of developers. I'm sure there are, as with any industry, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
But certainly the people I know, and I'd like to think myself is included in that, we care about what we do and we want to leave a positive legacy. And we're aware that our point of view is not always going to be agreeable with other people. But I think there's been a movement in the press, in politics, that's become very divisive between kind of us and them. And that needs to be fixed in some way where it is a bit more collaborative in its approach. And perhaps a way of dealing with that is, as you suggested, maybe zoning. So it takes the unknown out of it, because I think a lot of it comes from, I could put an application in on any property, and that's going to come as a shock, perhaps, to the people around it. If you're buying a house and you know that next door to you at any point can be a 3-storey building that's houses or flats, if that application comes in, you might be a bit disappointed, but you're going to know it's coming at some point, so that shock has gone. I don't know. There's lots of facets to the planning system, but there is also a lot broken with it at the moment.
Yeah, I think exactly that. It's kind of zoning, pretty much, with the what I'd proposed that I'd read on a I think it was a Facebook thread. But ultimately, the same reasons why what you've given as well is that generally these officers that work at the planning department, they are overworked, underpaid. Any of the good ones will probably move over to the private side. I did a post recently about turnaround times and the uncertainty in the planning system on LinkedIn, which, from time to time I get some good feedback and good conversation going. And I was asking if any of these departments could say anything about come out, but there's nobody who has a voice there as well. There's no accountability. There's no
No.
voice there. With 13 different housing ministers, I think in 13 years is the record at the moment. It's kind of no wonder that nobody's been able to put in any sort of long-term plan to be able to really resolve this issue, and therefore it just gets worse and worse.